Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I believe I was telepathically contacted by aliens. Who am I? A deeply flawed, imperfect person and young man. What did I experience? What felt like telepathic contact with aliens? Prophetic visions and fantasies later verified shortly after in life, from small random details, to seeing a car flip over on the road in a daydream reverie and going out to help the drivers. The night after this, my dad told me he was driving somewhere at night, saw a car veer off the side and flip over by the road in front of him, and pulled over to help them. Luckily, they were unharmed. To a vision of the pandemic, a totalitarian plot to enslave and depopulate the world, and dissenters being harshly mocked and excluded from society as insane or bigoted, hateful conspiracy theorists shortly before the pandemic. Why do I think this happened? I can't say for sure, but I think it's possible that I've been subconsciously influenced and primed by extraterrestrials for experiences like these since childhood. As a teenager, I had a spiritual awakening which led to me heavily diving into esotericism, occultism, mysticism, the study of world religions and philosophy for years, along with other massive synchronicities associated with my own studies into these. Question: do you think you're a special person? Starseed? Have special abilities? Are some type of uniquely bestowed teacher, leader, messiah, guru, prophet, or gift to humanity? Absolutely not. I'm just another person. I'm far from a hero and did not react to these events bravely. They gave me a nervous breakdown and made me depressed for years, but I mainly and fortunately recovered in about the past year, which was also seen in my vision, that I would struggle with mental illness for years, then recover and even flourish. Ask me anything if you will. Sorry for the lengthy essay blog post. Again, I cannot claim to be omniscient and may not even be a good oracle or source of info on everything. Just what I know, or failing that, think I know. Some stuff that might get the thread going. I believe there are such things as books of power, to rework some terms from the shamanic tradition described by Carlos Castaneda in his works. Basically, books endowed by the author's experiences, wisdom, and supernatural experiences, with a type of power which can awaken dormant energies and tendencies towards having these same or similar experiences in receptive readers. Books that can act like a blessing or a curse. So what does this mean? In fact, it's a similar worldview to both occultists on the one hand and traditional religious followers on the other, except with different values attached to it. Like, reading books on magic, the occult, esotericism, UFOs, can open you to demonic possession, but reading the Holy Scriptures is good and puts you under God's influence, like some fundamentalist Christians say. Or conversely, deeply studying and practicing what's in these books can actually lead to magic. So what are some books of power, whether malevolent or benevolent? Works like Philip K. Dick's Valis, Robert Anton Wilson's Cosmic Trigger, and other works of his. I, in fact, was reading Cosmic Trigger when the events started overtly happening, which scared me, because it's exactly what Raw was talking about in that book. His paranormal experiences, synchronicities, and sense of communicating with hyper-intelligent extraterrestrial beings. The Carlos Castaneda books, as just mentioned. Whitley Strieber's Communion and his other works, and works in general of or about alien contactees and or abductees. Dr. John Mack's Abduction and other works. Bud Hopkins's collected works on alien abduction and interviews of those claiming to have undergone it. Colonel Wendell C. Stevens's massive collection of works on the same, other works of or about alien contactees like Betty Andreasen, the Andreasen Affair, etc. Religious texts and scriptures in general, Upanishads, Gitas, the Torah, the Old and New Testaments, the Quran, Buddhist sutras. Some of esotericism, mysticism, and the occult, Kenneth Grant's Typhonian tradition, the Gurdjieff Fourth Way teachings, theosophy, anthroposophy, and so forth. Some other conspiracy or alien literature like the Montauk books by Preston Nichols, Peter Moon, and some other figures at times. David Ickey's books. It could go on for quite a while. Mentioning of a book is not an endorsement of that book or everything in that book. There could easily be, and undoubtedly is, lots of hogwash scattered in some of these books. while they still have overall merit and value.
You're not in contact with the aliens, Anon, you're just psychic. Post-chart.
Natal chart. I'm not into the actual modern study of astrology, the zodiac signs, even while knowing of and accepting some ancient teachings about astrology. That man is the receiver of and intimately bound to and influenced by astrological influences, planets and stars as analogically angels or archangels, etc. There's also some Hindu teachings tying astrology and astronomy to their Yuga cycles chronology, and their esoteric teaching that the sun of our solar system, Surya Narayan, revolves around a distant black hole at the center of our galaxy, allegorically named Kali Ma, and that one full revolution of our sun around this black hole takes about 26,000 years, a time period corresponding to the precession of the equinoxes of Earth discovered by modern-day astronomers. We're currently at about the 13,000-year midpoint descending cycle of this revolution, having reached the lowest phase in human history, the Kali Yuga. Around now, the Kali Yuga culminates in an apocalypse, clearing the way for the ascending Dwapara Yuga, corresponding to the sun rounding that curve and completing the latter half of its galactic year, cycle around the black hole. This Yuga cycle theory is laid out by the Hindu guru Swami Sri Yukteswar Giri, who was the teacher of Paramahansa Yogananda, who was instrumental in bringing Hinduism to the United States in the early 20th century. The guru of Swami Sri Yukteswar Giri was himself Sri Lahiri Mahasai, who was initiated into Kriya Yoga, a practice of mentally chanting mantras and revolving them up and down your spine in rhythm with your being, held to lead to a rise in Kundalini Shakti in the human body, nervous system, etheric, astral, and causal bodies, leading to an awakening of the God Self, or in the fourth state of Turiya Samadhi, stilling and inducing the mind towards Samadhi, or cessation of ordinary mental processes and subsequent enlightenment, by the immortal Hindu guru Mahavatar Babaji, who has reputedly been alive for a couple thousand years, and sometimes finds receptive Hindu yogis and students to teach, according to legend. He is also known as Babaji Gorakhnath. I mention this seeming digression because religion plays a big role in this. The most advanced sages, saints, teachers, mystics, gurus, yogis, shamans, and the like of various world religious traditions often have been the recipient of higher benevolent extraterrestrial contact. This is how Sumerian-style mythology and architecture that figures like Graham Hancock love and make so much of comes into play. This is analogous to what Hebrews, Christians, and Muslims might call angelic inspiration, or talking with angels. However, conversely and scarily enough, the obvious counterpart is also true, that likewise, some must have and may continue to contact, or be psychically influenced by, so-called demons, or malevolent anti-God, anti-good dark extraterrestrial forces, as well as immaterial etheric entities, called asuras in the Hindu tradition. Most intelligent extraterrestrial races are far more long-lived than us and technologically advanced than us. Some are even far more spiritually advanced than us, casually having and using abilities like telepathy, the manipulation of matter with the mind, psychokinesis, teleportation, clairvoyance/prophesying/foresight, remote viewing, the spanning of space and time in general. However, not all technologically more advanced races are more spiritually advanced, and vice versa. You can see this in the West today. The soulless, perverse New World Order leaders hoard Black Ops technology and current-edge scientific research, but are actually malevolent and degenerate. Anyway, some of these aliens in fact created us. We are modeled after them, similar to the story of Adam and Eve being made in our image, or the Elohim's image, in the book of Genesis. We were probably genetically engineered as a race renewal project of some aliens, fusing their genetics with the simians, ape or primate stock, of the earth to form humanity, including primitive root races like the Neanderthals, who were themselves upgraded into us. This explains the seeming unlikeliness of extraterrestrials frequently being displayed as humanoid, with a head on some shoulders, a face with eyes and mouth like ours, 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 feet and hands, etc. The reason for this is that we are, again, related to them. The more benevolent ones like to reach, contact, and educate receptive human beings on the Earth, including about divine and cosmic reality. That is, there is often a heavily spiritual message that contactees receive. Old religions and mythologies are something like a cargo cult. Do you know what a cargo cult is? When more technologically and culturally advanced Western colonialists and settlers met indigenous peoples of the Americas, Africa, the Caribbean islands, Australia, and so forth, some of the natives, overawed by the Westerners' superior technology, food, access to medicine, etc., formed primitive cults worshipping their benefactors, and crudely continued to use the rites of their shamanic indigenous traditions. Rain dances, sympathetic magic, totems, talismans, as well as carving items that looked like treasured ones of the West, radio-like wood carvings or of planes, etc., in an attempt to imitate Western technology, or even try to magically compel their good favor and graces to make them give more stuff to the natives. This cargo cult includes heavy social control elements from more malicious, crappy, and authoritarian extraterrestrial races. However, again, the situation is not so bleak as it first sounds, as some truly wise people of these traditions have indeed been, and some possibly continue to be, contacted and educated by benevolent, wiser, and more evolved extraterrestrials. This includes stuff like knowledge dispersed through Hindu schools and teachings like Vedanta, Samkhya, Shaktism, and Shaivist sects, and so forth, as well as even the mythological founders of these traditions, such as the being named Shiva, who lived on the earth about 50,000 years ago. Another alien contactee associated with the founding of a new religious school or teaching was the Buddhist Nagarjuna, 50 to 250 CE. His name translates, in fact, to friend, Arjuna, of the Nagas, or reptilian beings in Buddhist and Hindu mythology, sometimes benevolent and sometimes malevolent. He essentially created Mahayana Buddhism as we know it today. According to legend, he received the teaching of the Prajnaparamita Sutras from the land of Nagas. His works and teachings from starting Mahayana philosophy were massively influential in and continue to inspire Mahayana-influenced Buddhist teachings like Chan and Zen Buddhism, as well as Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhism. Hence, in a surreal way, which actually makes a strange sense if you open your intuition to it and consider how alien and exotic foreign a teaching like Zen is. A teaching like Zen actually partially has its roots of origin from off-world sources. And yet, in another sense, Zen has no historical origin at all, no one unique founder or lineal derivation, as it comes from all and nowhere, referring to certain high-level abstract truths about what they call the Buddha nature, on the nature of the self, on impermanence, on awareness or attention to being aware, on non-dual subject-object equivalence, and so forth. Basically, stuff like these are projects they seed into world cultures as an attempted uplifting and benevolent influence on us for our own good. I'm going to take a break from this thread, as I sense I've given readers too much too quickly, possibly easily overwhelming you. Also, I'm unsure if there's even much interest or receptive listeners, and that many simply automatically discount this as the writings of a high-functioning / unusually verbose schizophrenic, and would not want to waste effort and time if there's no good fruit of it. Great peace be with you. Other historical alien contactees include Parmenides of Elea, the ancient Greek pre-Socratic philosopher, who lived around the 6th to the 5th century BC. The legend he himself handed down in his philosophical poem, the major remaining source we have of his teachings, has him receiving a revelation from an unnamed, golden-haired goddess who whisks him into the heavens in a luminous chariot. She then explains to him how the mortals of Earth live in distorted pseudo-realities, with warring, fragmentary, conflicted cultures which obscure the truth, aletheia, hence only having access to their own spurious opinion, doxa. The way of truth, the goddess reveals to him, is based off of a seemingly simple yet most profound axiom. Being is. Only being exists, and non-being does not exist. This Parmenides uses as a launching point for a monist philosophy expounding on the oneness of being, similar to the philosophy and theology of the Vedas. In New Age parlance, Parmenides reached cosmic consciousness and tried to share it with others. Likewise, the Sufi of the Gulshani order, Syed Jafar, was a likely extraterrestrial contactee, this legend being preserved about him, recounted in one of Idris Shah's works on Sufism, Caravan of Dreams, 1986. This is a favorite tale of Balkan dervishes. It is attributed to Syed Jafar, died 1598 in Ephesus, who was a successor of Ibrahim Gulshani of Cairo, who founded the Gulshani order, a combination of the four paths of Sufism. He died in 1553. Jafar is popularly believed to have visited the stars as a sort of precursor to today's spacemen, in a luminous chariot without perceptible motive power. The Gulshanis handed back their metaphysical endowment in a brass, silver, and copper casket to the Azamiya, greater brethren in the 17th century, retaining, it is said, only the powers of obtaining interviews with certain historical figures long dead. The Sufi Shamsi Tabrizi, as well as his student, the famous Persian Sufi poet Jalaluddin Rumi, also were contacted by advanced extraterrestrials and introduced to an off-world cosmic religion of mystical monism, which they attempted to bring into Islam as the uplifting cultural influence buried within Islam known as Sufism. The Christian mystic, theologian, scientist, and inventor Emanuel Swedenborg, 1688 to 1772, was almost certainly an extraterrestrial contactee based off of his accounts, as well as other people corroborating his extrasensory perception abilities, gifts of prophesying and clairvoyance. Although clearly sounding insane to us today, Swedenborg was something of a phenomenon in his day, and many people attested to how sane, reasonable, mild, gentle, and benevolent he appeared when they met him, not seeming insane at all. He reported freely being able to visit heaven and hell and converse with angels. He also claimed to have visited other planets in our solar system, aided by angels, and wrote an entire theological and philosophical tract called Other Planets, asserting his belief other planets in the universe were populated, such as with angelic entities. He also was an astoundingly high-functioning polymath, having done scientific work in and prefigured ideas of modern neurology, sketches of an airplane, flying machine, pretty similar to what we have now, treatises on metallurgy and copper and ironworking, etc. He studied geology, botany, zoology, and the mechanical sciences under a number of scholars, inventors, and mechanics. He also wrote incredibly detailed theological interpretations of the scriptures, which form the basis of the Swedenborgian Church. As suggested earlier in this thread, the most advanced and developed human beings, according to extraterrestrial judgment, mainly belong to the world's greatest mystical and religious tradition and philosophical schools. They have reached a similar state of the evolution of their souls, colloquially termed enlightenment, or a higher state of consciousness. Using the most positive, uplifting, and intelligent sources in their society, they had to do this, or sometimes even learning from many sources. Guideposts to the development of the human consciousness and soul can be found in as apparently differing traditions as Zen, Sufism, and Vedanta, in ancient Greek philosophy, in Hermeticism, in Neoplatonism, and sometimes, to an extent, in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But often the most developed mystics of these religions are ironically shunted to the side and persecuted, their works and thought disregarded, sometimes outright banned or labeled heresy, due to the totalitarian tendencies erected around these same religions. These religions may have started as authentic revelations of the unity of being, God consciousness, other cosmic and divine knowledge, as well as contact with benevolent or angelic extraterrestrials, but were corrupted by many of their followers into anti-evolutionary theocracies. Extraterrestrials hence choose people like these as ideal contactees. Most of the conscious high-level alien contactees on the Earth actually have been and continue to remain anonymous. They are figures like Buddhists, shamans, Hindu yogis, Christian saints and mystics, Sufis, Greek sages, etc., deemed fit and suitable for contact, able to experience it without freaking out and psychologically and spiritually breaking to pieces. Those who had such contact thereafter had to continue living and functioning normally in society by blending in with humanity, keeping secret what the masses couldn't understand and would persecute them for. Sometimes, however, as in the cases above, they also started or contributed to religious or philosophical schools and teachings, sometimes including bits about such contact, either in a veiled allegorical form or in legends, or simply as literally as they could, and professing their belief it had happened, like Swedenborg, or as an esoteric tradition not revealed to the masses, and sometimes not even revealed at all.
Interesting info, OP. How have you incorporated these experiences in your daily life? What's your thoughts on the law of assumption? If you had a message to place on a billboard for all to see, what would it be?
I now believe there is a universal, perennial, and timeless wisdom accessible to all, regardless of one's location in a country time period, the culture or zeitgeist one belongs to. Remove these cultural accidents and learn to be still, to quiet and detach yourself from the mechanically, societally conditioned personality that's been formed in you, that you take as you. Do this, and you might glimpse higher truth. Part of it is simply common sense. Another part, benevolence. Another part, purification, simultaneously physical, verbal, emotional, and mental purification. Whether you call it the golden rule or karmic law, the ultimate import is the same. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and don't do to them what you wouldn't like done to you. I try to place wisdom above all else in life, seeing it as the highest good now, even if I frequently fail to live up to these high standards and indulge in the average contemporary vices of modern civilization, alcohol or drugs, junk food, too much screen time like internet or television, and so forth. However, after recovering from this episode, my habits got generally better and my outlook on life more positive. Some psychologists refer to this as post-traumatic growth. I was inspired to deeply research all the world's major religious and mystical schools in depth, which I continue to do, as well as both Western and Eastern philosophy. I was firmly reminded of my own and everyone's mortality, making me appreciate life much more. As obviously and repeatedly stated in this thread, I also clearly woke up to the existence of spiritual and immaterial realms of life. That mind and soul are actually higher and superior transcendent principles to the body, and are meant to shape, control, and discipline that body and their own emotions, instead of being slaves to the body or wayward emotions.
What your mind interpreted as aliens were spirits our ancestors would have interpreted as angels or demons, according to the behavior they exhibited. Angels come from the Greek angelos, which means messenger. As such, they're the messengers of God. But this only according to the Catholic tradition. Other faiths would interpret it differently. In other words, what us modern men interpret as aliens are spiritual entities contacting us. Now ask yourself why you've been contacted, and if they expected something of you. Good luck, OP.
I've never specifically read anything by Neville Goddard, and just now looked him up at your prompting, so can't give too much of a say on him. However, from what I just read of it, it seems he was distilling some timeless metaphysical and spiritual insights from the world's religious traditions, which may have some validity, of mind over matter, basically. Thank you for your input and insight. As implied in the OP and first few points, I also think it's probable this is what happened to science fiction author Philip K. Dick in his religious experiences, with him even using the term angelic to refer to some of them, I think, looking into angelology, the subset of theology which studies angels, and claiming contact with the Holy Spirit, which he likened to a living animated fire, not one which burned, but which illuminated. Dr. John E. Max works on this phenomenon, like Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens, 1994, and Passport to the Cosmos, Human Transformation and Alien Encounters, 1999, are especially great and well worth reading on this correlation he saw between alien contactee claimants and disturbed patients he treated and worked with spirituality and religion. He claimed modern Western materialistic, anti-metaphysics blocked us off from an understanding of and insight into this phenomenon, because we simply out of hand deny anything like this could happen. And paradoxically, on the other hand, apparently more primitive or less developed cultures, like shamanic indigenous ones, or the Tibetan culture, might have a better leg up on this phenomenon, even recording accounts like it and places for these beings in their mythology, and a shaman he talked to telling him experiences startlingly similar to that of his patients.
Base thread. Also, a lot of people are aliens from different galaxies that volunteer to incarnate in human bodies to help the native humans evolve. They don't remember they're aliens because it was part of the plan and the mission they choose, but Usually they're famous historical figures like Nikola Tesla.
Thank you, and yes, I was going to mention Tesla, too. He actually explicitly claimed this. He felt he was telepathically receiving communication from aliens at times, as well as more overly and literally receiving transmissions of theirs to his devices, as well as just seeing scientific truths in visions. He also studied and employed concepts from Hinduism, believing things like Akasha and Prana really correlated to scientific realities. As may be already implied in this thread, but not explicitly said yet, I believe this more subtle telepathic contact and influence, not just the outright nuts and bolts scenario of lifting people up into their spaceships, has played, does play, and will continue to play a more massive influence on humanity than most can conceive of. Once you see this concept and possibility, alien telepathic inspiration of human beings, then look at many strange outliers and figures in human history, or various myths, legends, etc., it becomes impossible to unsee it. Strangely enough, it's like what psychologists call pronoia, the opposite of paranoia. The belief that there's a benevolent conspiracy going on to help you or all of humanity in general. Another thing that will happen is extraterrestrial observation and monitoring of the Earth and interaction with Earth peoples, as well as the corresponding UFO presence, will get more blatant, obvious, and undeniable. This will reach even surreal and frightening proportions. It will require great spiritual strength to bear with it. Blatantly and obviously experiencing something that can't happen, or this isn't supposed to be real, can be likened to conceptual assault, as one writer I like, Robert Anton Wilson, put it. The general agenda of the more benevolent and advanced extraterrestrial races seems to be to try to prevent a thermonuclear Earth-destroying World War III, as well as against our destruction and abuse of the environment in general, and the doings of the criminally insane and corrupt political, military, and economic leaders. They work to prevent such things as nuclear war, for instance, by hovering around and sometimes disabling nuclear missile silos. This is something they've explicitly made known and flexed to major world powers. They all know, and they know the others know. They're rather scared by it, and have agreed internationally to keep it secret from the public, as they don't want to alarm and frighten the public, or traumatize the sleeping hive mind, normies, and NPCs. However, they also seem to have an ethical system against explicit and overt interaction with or contact with all of humanity publicly, until or unless, perhaps, the situation on Earth gets so bad, it requires them to explicitly make their presence known. Call this interstellar or galactic law, seeing us as something like a third world nation, an international crisis, some primitive developed peoples in a backwater of a galaxy whom they try to mercifully, compassionately stop from killing themselves, which could lead to something like a galactic refugee crisis, as well as deep trauma for the survivors who suddenly find out aliens are real.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.